We're taking a look at one of North Carolina's treasures of Black history with a visit to the oldest African American church still standing in the state of North Carolina. Learn about St. Philip's African Moravian Church as the church celebrates 150 years next on Black Issues Forum.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
Welcome to Black Issues Forum. I'm Deborah Holt-Noel. On May 5th, 1822, an announcement was made that a small congregation of Africans would be a part of the St. Philip's Church congregation. The event was a sign of the complex history of race, humanity, and the Moravian Church, but today the church is still standing with remnants that tell of its intriguing past. The church celebrates its 150th anniversary this year, and we'll talk with today's guests about upcoming events and more. But first, producer Jeff Smith brings us this story from a visit to Old Salem and the historic St. Philip's Church.
This plot of land on the southern end of Old Salem has served many uses over the years.
This is a graveyard that has its origins in 1775 when the Moravians of Salem would bury strangers in this graveyard, which was in the Tavern Meadow at that time.
These strangers were people who might have been passing through town and died at the tavern while seeing the doctor or even visiting a friend. They could still be considered a stranger buried here.
That did not necessarily mean they did not know them. It meant that they were spiritually not Moravians, and therefore were not buried in the Moravian God's Acre, which is at the other end of Church Street.
Burials of strangers continued in this stranger's graveyard until 1815.
In 1822, the congregation had divided, and there were members of the black community who desired Christian access to Christianity, and they wanted to form a congregation. And white sisters of the Moravian congregation participated in this effort, and out of that effort came the first church here in 1823, which is the log church.
This log church building is an exact replica of the original log church structure which once stood here. Now it holds informational pieces on the history of the church. As you can see, though, it's a small building.
As the black population increased, by 1861, a much larger sanctuary was needed, not only for the congregation, but for much of the black population that inhabited Forsyth County in 1861. There were more than 1,700 enslaved people in Forsyth County in 1861. And that's when the brick church was constructed here.
As you walk into the sanctuary, it's hard not to notice the simplicity of the facility. White walls and black wooden pews align in a row, a simple piano sitting silently in the corner, yet you can almost still hear the choir singing along with the notes being played on the ivory keyboard.
Oh, bring back memories. Been going here all my life, about 60 years plus. I guess I was about 4 years old when I first started.
Faye Little is still a member of St. Philip's Church. She, along with the rest of the congregation, left this structure to move into a new building in 1952. Still, the St. Philip's congregation returns to this sacred place to worship several times per year.
I always enjoyed St. Philip's with the love feast and the Russia tea and the buns and the candles at Christmas time when Christmas Eve comes.
Ms. Little says her early years of going to St. Philip's meant walking each Sunday along with her brothers to the church on pleasant days. It was not as easy to get there when the weather was not good. That's where the preacher, Reverend Hall, and his wife would step in to help.
We didn't have any cars in our family, so Mrs. Hall would drive us to church, and she would make 3 or 4 trips to come to the church to bring all the kids in the neighborhood to church to make sure that we had a way of getting to church.
I can remember coming here on Sundays After my brothers and my cousins, along with George Jr., had come and made fires in the stove to heat the church, they would come early and lay a fire so that at 2 o'clock the church was comfortable in the winter times.
Lethea Coleman is a member of St. Philip's as well. She, like so many of the congregation, comes from a long lineage of members of this historic black church.
My grandmother came here when she was a child, but she never owned a car, so when she moved to a different area, it was too far to get to the church. So when Dr. Hall came and told us about him starting to be the minister here and everything, they were really, real gung-ho about us coming back to the Moravian Church.
So I was like 4 years old, and I got in a lot of trouble about going to the piano, trying to play, in which I couldn't hit a note because I don't know nothing about music. But I enjoyed coming because Reverend Hall and Mrs. Hall made us feel welcome.
I think this church and all of the things that it stands for is one of the things that is a special blessing to me. I mean, it's wonderful to tell somebody the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in this church. It's a good thing to be able to say that even in a time when everything was divided and everybody was going through all of their different feelings and animosities and hates and loves and everything else that was involved in it, that the church was positive in what it did then, and it's still positive in what it does now.
While the church structure was erected at the start of a rough time in U.S. history, it was the end of the Civil War when Joseph Johnston surrendered the Army of Tennessee in Durham, North Carolina, that led to a historic moment for the church, its members, and all of the country.
He surrendered to Sherman, and Sherman left the Army of Ohio in North Carolina to occupy it. That was at the end of April, and in May of 1865, the 10th Ohio Cavalry came into Salem, and a Union cavalry officer in the sanctuary of this church, this brick church, on May 21st, 1865, formally told a large gathering of the black population of this place that by virtue of Lincoln's proclamation of January 1st, 1863, that they were free.
The church history has involved the period of time when the church did not own slaves, and then the period of time when the church did own slaves, and how they managed that with all of the different voices and the different things, and how once the Jim Crow laws and stuff were put into effect, the church sort of blended into what was going on at that time. But it's also wonderful to know that the church is leading the way out of that time.
When the church had outgrown the main structure of the 1861 church building, an addition was added. The only problem is that they built it onto the front of the facility.
In 1890, a Sunday school was built off to the front of the 1861 church, the 1861 sanctuary, and it was built out over the Strangers' Graveyard. And in that construction, 14 graves, we know we did archaeology under the Sunday school. 14 graves were covered by this new build on the front of this church.
You can still see the grave sites through an open area in the Sunday school flooring. A few headstones still mark the burial spots of some of the strangers' final resting spots. In all, there were 131 people buried in the strangers' graveyard, including whites and blacks.
To me, it's really inspiring that we get to come back here and keep the continuity from the old St. Philip's to the new St. Philip's. Sometimes I have problems remembering to say historic St. Philip's and then, you know, the new St. Philip's that we have now, because to me it's a total continuation of the same church. We were a family then, we are a family now.
And here to talk with us more about St. Philip's and the church's 150th anniversary celebration, I'd like to welcome today's guests. We have Cheryl Harry, Director of African American Programming with Old Salem Museums and Gardens. Kim Maddox, Division Associate for Operations and Outreach, also with Old Salem Museums and Gardens, and Leo Rucker, a historic interpreter, also with the museum. And to the three of you, thank you for coming out this afternoon.
Thank you.
Cheryl, can you tell me when is the museum available to visitors?
The museum is open Tuesday through Saturday from 9:30 to 4:30, and on Sunday from 1 to 4:30.
And is that just the one structure, or are there actually two structures out there?
That's the St. Philip's Heritage Center. Comprises the brick church, the African Moravian brick church, the log church, and the graveyards. But of course, the museum is open with all the buildings are open during those hours.
Wonderful. Now, Kim, I'd like to get from you, tell us a little bit about some of the events coming up around the celebration.
Okay, well, of course, we kicked off the 150th anniversary with the December 15th celebration, which is the consecration date of the brick church. So that celebration is on December 15th, starting with a love feast with the congregation and a series of events for the entire day. And then for the month of February, we'll have some lectures and seminars, Saturday seminar on February 11th. Beginning at 10 in the morning and ending at 4:30. And we have several speakers for the day. And you can go to Old Salem's web page and link to the MESDA page and look at the events, and it will list all of the times and speakers for that. We also have, in the month of February, the Frederick Douglass Oratorical Contest. And this is open to middle school and high school students to compete for a cash prize for the organization that they are partnered with, their church or school. And it's meant to sort of promote social consciousness and critical thinking skills among youth. We will also have Michelle Lanier coming in the month of March. She's acting president of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, and she will be doing a lecture in the month of March. She's also affiliated with the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, and so she'll be delivering a lecture surrounding that. And we also have some events planned for the month of June for Juneteenth celebrations.
Wow.
And a lot going on.
And in June, I would imagine you have some things that are specific for children?
We have had in the past some camps for the Juneteenth celebration where we've had children come to the site and take on some activities. We have our Spring Fest for the museum will be going on right around that time in May and June. So there will be all kinds of things for children to do throughout the district. And of course, we're hopeful to have some things for children to come and do in the St. Philip's Heritage Center as well.
Terrific. Now, Leo, you have been very much involved in one of the pieces of artwork, or some of the pieces of artwork that are going to be used sort of as the image for the 150th. Tell us a little bit about those images.
Well, that's a pen and ink drawing that we just basically kept it very simple. That basically kind of gives you a boldness of the structure of how, your focus is on that brick church and that, when it was created in 1861. As well as we did some other renditions that were watercolor, acrylic watercolor that rendered when they first actually finished completing the reconstruction of the log cabin as well as the brick church in 2005.
Very good, very good. Now, Cheryl, I wanted to ask, how significant is it that you all have been able to capture this history of Africans in this church and share it?
Well, this is an architectural monument to African American experience. African Americans have so few early buildings to document the history. And here we have a church that's still standing after 150 years. So we really wanted to celebrate that and get that out to the broader community so that people will know about it. This is the church where freedom was announced in 1865. Enslaved people heard that they were free, and the original pews are still there, and you can come and sit and feel that. So it was very important, and the activities that we have planned are just, something that's for everybody, so that everybody can get involved and feel a part of this, whether you're Moravian or not.
And it's key that we emphasize just the historic significance of the building, because there are African American structures that are gone or that haven't been restored. Now, this building has actually been restored. Was it difficult to get the funding for that?
The funding came about in several ways. It's actually a $3 million project, the entire site. And we try and let people know the monies that had to be raised to go into that. And we have this jewel sitting in our community, in our state. And we want people to come and enjoy it, because, you know, to share it with your children, to share it with visitors, because it's there, and people put time, blood, sweat, and tears into making it possible.
And there's another element to it's the log church that's got figurines and voice in it. Kim, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The log church is a reconstruction. So the interior space, since it's not a restoration, it's not the original, is modern and has been adapted as an education piece and an orientation piece. So when visitors come to the site, inside that building are stories of 10 people buried in the graveyard next door. And they're figures, we don't know what these folks look like. So they're pieces of art done by an artist named Warren Parker. And at the feet of those figures are their original headstones that were picked up off of the graveyard but found underneath the brick church during the restoration. So there's a phone there, and you can pick up the phone and push the buttons and listen to what the lives might have been like for these folks as they lived in Salem and worshiped in these churches.
It's just a very powerful interpretation and interactive exhibit that visitors can go and experience. Leo, I wanted to ask you a little bit about something that one of the women talked about in the feature, which is the love feast. What is that?
Well, the love feast is a non-sacramental practice that it goes back into the history of the African Moravians, that they always held on a special day. Well, it's a special occasion like Christmas and Easter were the main two focus days that they would hold at love feast, where you had almost as many as 600 people would show up in the church that would come and celebrate this wonderful event that is kind of like, it's not like a communion, but it was a celebration with the breaking of bread, a type of beverage that was served, and you had what we call diners or diners, and I always get that word wrong, who would serve it, prepare it in a room, and then they would take it to the sanctuary and distribute it to the members, along with their candle that would be lit at the end, that would be passing, well, not passing, but lit from one person to the next person, to all the candles that were lit. And then they would have like prayer and then worship and praising, kind of going back to the African heritage, way that they would praise and worship.
Now, this was just for the African congregants, or was this integrated?
I'm not well, I think it was integrated eventually, but it was kind of more traditional for the significance for the African Moravian Church, that brick church at that time. So,
Sharon?
It originated actually when the Moravians were in Germany, when they held their first love feast. And of course it came to the Americas with them as well. So as an African Moravian, you would of course celebrate the love feast. But love feasts were very a special time, especially for African Moravians, because it allowed them a chance to come together and to really fellowship. So it was very, very important in the African Moravian Church, even though it is a German Moravian tradition.
And in addition to being unique in terms of its lasting, the structure lasting, there's something unique about the Moravian Church and the belief systems. Talk a little bit about the complex history of the church and their beliefs about African Americans and humanity in the context of slavery.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they come to the site, you know, their first thing is, oh, the church owned slaves? How could a church own slaves? Moravians believe that everyone was equal spirituals. So if you joined the Moravian Church, you became equal. So black and white Moravians would worship together. You even had African American Moravians in the Single Brothers house. There was the first slave that the Moravian Church purchased. Their daughter actually attended the Salem Academy of the school there. So when you look at, you know, the coming together is what we call it, of the Africans and the Moravians, and then the separation piece. After the Moravians had been in this country for an extended period of time, they adopted the practices and attitudes of the surrounding community. So there was a separation. Segregation entered into Salem around 1815. And 1822, the Moravians totally segregated the worship services. So up until that time, black and white Moravians did worship together.
That should be pretty surprising to visitors, is it?
Yes, it is. And, you know, when they learn of this, and it gives visitors also an opportunity to talk about slavery, to talk about segregation in a what can be perceived as a safe setting, and to let people really work through those things. When the tour is over, they'll say, you know, this was the best part of the tour. Mm-hmm. This was really good, you know. So even though, you know, we're there as a museum and we're presenting the African American experience, it's also the American experience. And people get to share in this from various walks of life from all over the world.
Kim, did you have an opportunity to be a part of discovering any of the remnants around the church, particularly the graves, how that was?
Yes, that's actually how I came to the site many years ago. Before the church was restored and the exhibits were open, we did extensive archaeology on the graveyard to locate the position of the graves because the headstones had been removed. So I was lucky to be a part of one of the archaeological teams that worked on the graveyard, and inside the church underneath that front part where you can see 3 of the graves in one of the exhibits. And that was back in, I guess, 99 and 2000. So yeah, I've had a lot to do with the sort of artifactual remnants that we found there at St. Philip's.
Now, back to some of the celebrations that are coming up. You mentioned Juneteenth. Mm-hmm. Are there other, what specific events are happening during Juneteenth?
Well, now for Juneteenth, we plan to kick off the Juneteenth this year on May 20th. Freedom was announced in Salem on May 21st, 1865. So we're going to do Freedom Sunday this year to kick off the Juneteenth service that will be held actually in June. Now, prior to this, we're doing something a little different in Salem this year. We're going to do something called a Heritage Family Fest to celebrate Black History Month, and that's going to be February 18th. Because of the African American presence in Salem throughout all of the buildings, throughout the entire district, we plan to highlight this, and people will be able to come and visit each building and learn about the African American footprint in Salem. All through Salem, we're going to have music and dance and song, exhibits. Leo's going to be drawing, and it's just going to be a great day. And we're inviting youth groups to come out to this. You know, we're going to have an organ recital. Now the Moravians are, you know, music. That's very Moravian, and we have this organ. Kim, how old is that organ? The Tannenberg organ.
The Tannenberg organ is very old.
Okay, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to play African American church music on it. It's just going to be great.
Not bad.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Yes, so it's going to be a great day.
Wonderful. And you're going to be doing some drawing.
Yes.
What kind of drawing?
Well, we're going to be doing drawings that's depicting the history of the people who have been founders, who came through there, who helped build that community. And sometimes I do some fun stuff with the kids, do caricatures, you know, that kind of keep them intrigued, because, you know, it's always hard sometimes to hold their attention. So if you do fun stuff, it makes them create conversation about a picture that's done of them or someone that they know. So we're going to mix it up and keep it, you know, fun and moving all at the same time, as well as sharing the history, even as I create, you know, renditions of them or either something that depicts that history.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, congratulations on 150 years, and hope many people take time to come and visit the gardens and the museums. I'd like to thank Cheryl Harry, Kim Maddox, and Leo Rucker for coming out today. For more information about today's show, visit us online at unctv.org/BIF. You'll find links to email us your comments and join us as fans of BIF on Facebook. Or you can call us on the BIF line at 919-549-7167. Be sure to meet us right back here each Sunday afternoon at 4:30 for Black Issues Forum. I'm Deborah Holt-Noel. Thank you for spending your time with us.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.